I still remember that morning. The moment everything fell apart. If someone had told me that a heart could break from just a few words, I wouldn't have believed it, until I watched the man I loved most walk out the door, leaving me and our newborn twins behind. I used to believe love could overcome anything. That as long as we were together, nothing could tear us apart. I was wrong. Love, I learned, isn't always enough. Not when it's up against greed, ambition, and the manipulation of a woman who calls herself his mother. That was the day I realized my children and I never truly belonged in his world. I met Daniel on an autumn afternoon, the kind where golden leaves cover the sidewalks and the air smells like something new. I had just moved to New York. A fresh interior design graduate, full of hope and hungry for opportunity. Daniel Montgomery was, well, I didn't know then who he really was. We met by chance at a small cafe tucked away on a quiet street. He was just a charming guy with a warm smile and the brightest blue eyes I'd ever seen. Not the heir to Montgomery and Company, a real estate empire that stretched from Manhattan to Los Angeles. We fell in love fast. The kind of fast that feels right when you're young and full of dreams. Daniel wasn't like the wealthy men you hear about. He didn't show off. He didn't act distant or arrogant. He was kind, attentive, gentle. Like I was the only person in the world. Those early months were the happiest time of my life. But I had no idea how heavy the name Montgomery truly was, or how easily it could crush the life we were building. When I found out I was pregnant, Daniel was over the moon. He held me close and promised to protect me and our baby forever. But his promises weren't enough. Not when his mother, Margaret Montgomery, stepped in. Margaret had steel-grey eyes and a heart to match. I met her a week after Daniel found out I was pregnant. She invited us to some fancy party at the Montgomery estate. It was everything I wasn't: chandeliers, million-dollar art, rooms filled with men in suits and women in gowns that cost more than my rent. From the moment I walked in, I knew I didn't belong. They looked at me like I was an outsider. A mistake. Margaret sat at the center of it all, sipping red wine and scanning me like I was something under a microscope. Her smile was polite, but cold. "Daniel tells me you're pregnant," she said, with zero warmth. How unexpected. I didn't know what to say. I just squeezed Daniel's hand. He gave a nervous smile, trying to keep things pleasant, but I could feel how tense he was. She didn't say anything else that night. But I could feel it. This wasn't over. Things changed after that. Slowly, at first. Daniel became distant. He stayed up late, took long calls with his mother, barely spoke when I asked what was wrong. He always told me it was nothing. That I didn't need to worry. But I did. Every day. By the time I gave birth to our twins, I knew something was deeply wrong. Daniel was there in the hospital, smiling as he held them. But it felt like there was a wall between us. Something I couldn't reach through. And then, one morning, I finally got my answer. He came into our small apartment with hollow eyes. His shoulders looked heavy, like he was carrying the weight of the world. I was holding the twins, gently rocking them, and when I saw him, I smiled. I thought he had come to start our new life together. But then I saw his face. "We need to talk," he said softly. I placed the babies in their crib and turned to him. "What's wrong, Daniel?" He didn't look at me. He swallowed hard. I can't do this anymore." My heart stopped. "Can't do what?" He took a deep breath. His voice cracked. "I have to leave." It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "Leave?" I whispered. "What do you mean?" His eyes finally met mine, tired, pained, but certain. "My mother was right," he said. "We don't belong in the same world. I can't stay." Tears rushed to my eyes. "You're leaving me? Leaving your children? Just because she told you to?" He didn't answer. And in that moment, I knew. The man I loved was gone. Daniel didn't even look back. He walked out the door and left me there, alone, with 2 newborns and a heart that felt like it had shattered into 1,000 pieces. I sat on the floor, staring at the door. A part of me still hoped he'd walk back in and say it was all a mistake. That this was just a bad dream. But he didn't. It was just me and the twins now. They had no idea their father had walked out on them. No clue how alone I felt. The days that followed were the darkest of my life. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I just held my babies and cried. The apartment felt so empty. At night, their tiny cries echoed off the walls, mixing with the sound of my own sobs. I was in pain, physically, from childbirth, but worse than that was the ache in my chest. I kept replaying that moment. His voice. The way he said I can't do this. The way he chose her. Chose money. Chose the legacy over us. He had once promised me forever. But when it got hard, he left. And I had to find a way to keep going, for them. I felt like a different person. I let myself drown in sadness, shutting the world out completely. My phone rang countless times, friends, acquaintances, people who cared, but I never picked up. I didn't know how to talk to anyone. I didn't know what to say when all I had left was a broken heart and 2 tiny babies who depended on me. Then one night, as the rain tapped softly against the window, something hit me. I didn't have time to grieve anymore. These 2 little souls needed me. If I kept going like this, who would care for them? Who would hold them when they were sick? Who would love them the way they deserved? Daniel had chosen to leave them. But I never would. I wiped my tears, took a deep breath, and for the first time in days, I told myself, you have to get up. The next day, I started looking for a job. But it wasn't easy. Before I got pregnant, I worked at a small interior design firm in Manhattan. But as my due date got closer, I had to take time off to prepare for the twins. After Daniel left, I reached out to my old job, but they had already filled my position. No one wanted to hire a single mother with newborns. I couldn't work late hours or offer the kind of flexible schedule other employees could. I sent out application after application. Every single one got rejected. Some recruiters were honest. They told me they didn't think I could focus on the job because of my kids. Others were more polite, saying they needed someone who could fully commit. Each rejection felt like another door slamming in my face. Another reminder that I was alone. But I didn't have a choice. I had to keep going. There were days when I felt completely hopeless. But whenever I looked into my baby's innocent eyes, I found the strength to keep trying. I cut every extra expense. I learned to live as simply as possible. I couldn't afford childcare, so I handled everything alone. The sleepless nights didn't stop, not because I was still grieving, but because my babies woke up one after the other. I learned how to change diapers with one hand while scrolling through job sites with the other. I started looking for remote work, anything I could do from home while caring for my children. Finally, after weeks of searching, I got a freelance job doing interior design for a small company. The pay wasn't great, but it was something. It covered our basic needs. I worked late into the night after the twins fell asleep, with only the light from my computer glowing in the dark room. The next few months were hard. I was a mom, a worker, and the only person providing for my family. Some days, I was so tired I thought I'd collapse. But I couldn't stop. I had already lost so much, I couldn't lose myself too. One day, I realized something. The pain wasn't as sharp anymore. It was still there, like a wound that hadn't fully healed, but it no longer controlled me. I wasn't that broken woman sitting in the corner crying anymore. I was a mother. I was stronger than I knew. I didn't know what the future would bring. But I had started walking my own path. And this time, I wouldn't let anyone decide my future for me. I got used to the long, sleepless nights. When the twins finally slept, I'd sit at my computer. The pale blue light would cast soft shadows on my tired face as I worked. But freelance design work barely paid our bills. I needed something more. Something that felt like mine. Then one afternoon, while folding baby clothes, I had an idea. Most kids' clothes look the same, either boring and cheap or beautiful and ridiculously expensive. I thought, why not create baby clothes that are both cute and affordable? I wasn't a fashion designer, but I had always loved making things. When I was little, my mom taught me how to sew tiny dresses for my dolls. She's gone now, but those lessons stayed with me. So, I gave it a shot. I borrowed an old sewing machine from my downstairs neighbor and started small. Soft onnesses, stretchy leggings, little dresses. At first, I made them only for my twins. But when I posted a few pictures online, friends started asking where they could buy them. That's when I realized, maybe I had something here. I didn't have money to invest. But I had drive. Every spare dollar I earned went into fabric and supplies. I taught myself to sew better, design better, and even how to start a tiny online shop. It wasn't easy. I listed my clothes online, but no one noticed. I emailed mom bloggers, no replies. One person placed a small order but cancelled last minute. The rejections piled up. I started wondering if I was just wasting my time. But one night, I watched my babies sleep peacefully in the clothes I made for them. And I knew I couldn't give up. I had come too far. I changed my approach. I took better photos. Built a small website. Started a blog where I shared my story, how I was building something from nothing, as a single mom trying to survive. I joined parenting groups on social media. I shared my journey, and quietly introduced my clothes. And slowly, the orders started coming in. My very first customer was a young mom in Chicago. She bought a tiny outfit for her baby girl. When I got the payment alert, I burst into tears. Not because of the money, but because it was proof I wasn't stuck. That someone out there believed in what I was doing. Then came the second order. Then the third. Moms started messaging me, saying how soft and comfy the clothes were. Some even sent pictures of their babies wearing my designs, tiny smiles in tiny outfits. I named the brand Little Blessings. Because that's what my twins were. They gave me a reason to keep going. The months that followed were hard but beautiful. I worked day and night, caring for my babies, sewing clothes, packing orders, answering emails. My small apartment turned into a sewing room. Fabric piled up in corners. Thread was everywhere. Each morning, I woke up before the twins to check emails. While they napped, I cut fabric. At night, I taught myself marketing, advertising, branding. I was exhausted. But I had never felt more alive. Then one day, something happened that changed everything. A mom influencer on Instagram shared a photo of her baby wearing my outfit. She loved the quality and style. The post went viral. My inbox blew up. Orders poured in. I stared at my screen, in shock. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I had to call a friend to help me pack orders because I couldn't keep up with the growing demand. I quickly found a small local workshop to help produce my most popular designs. In just 6 months, Little Blessings had grown from a small online shop into a well-known name in the children's fashion space. I was no longer just working to survive. I was building a future for myself and my children. For the first time in years, I felt proud of myself. One evening, while folding clothes to prepare for shipping, I got an email from a major mother and baby retail chain in New York. They wanted to collaborate and bring Little Blessings into their stores. I set my phone down, my hands shaking. This was the kind of opportunity one had never even dared to dream of. I looked over at my sleeping children, my heart full of gratitude. Yes, I had lost a lot, but in the process, I had found something even more valuable. I had found myself. And I knew this was just the beginning. I never imagined I'd be standing here today. From being abandoned in a small, cramped apartment with 2 newborns, I had become the owner of a thriving children's clothing brand. Little Blessings was no longer just a side project. It had become a recognized name among moms across the country. We were featured in articles about female entrepreneurs, and our clothes were now on the shelves of big-name stores. Looking back, it still felt like a dream I once thought was impossible. But the most powerful part wasn't the money or the success. It was the fact that I had found me again. I wasn't the broken woman crying behind closed doors while the man who promised to love her walked away. I had stood up. I had built something I could be proud of, something that was mine, and mine alone. Every morning, I wake up in a bigger, brighter apartment. I watch my 2 children giggle and run around freely. I no longer worry about how to afford their milk. I don't spend sleepless nights counting coins or wondering how we'll survive the next month. Now, I can give them a life that's stable and filled with joy. I can think about the future without fear. But more importantly, I don't resent Daniel anymore. For a long time, I thought I'd never forgive him. He had abandoned me at my weakest, choosing money and power over his own family. But over time, I realized something: holding on to anger was only keeping me stuck in the past. Daniel no longer had a place in my life. And honestly, he didn't matter anymore. One day, while checking my work calendar, I got a message from an unknown number. "Amanda. It's Daniel. Can we meet?" I stared at the message. A strange feeling washed over me. It had been years since I heard from him. After he walked out, Daniel completely disappeared from our lives. I didn't know if he was happy with his choices or not, and honestly, I didn't care anymore. I set the phone down. I didn't reply. That afternoon, I sat in my home office, looking over designs for my new product line. My mind drifted a little, but this time, the memories didn't hurt. I remembered the day he left me in that tiny apartment. The heartbreak. The fear. The crushing sadness. But I also remembered everything I did to climb out of that pain. Every small step that led me to where I am now. I wasn't that woman anymore. I was stronger now. More confident. More at peace. I didn't need anyone to complete me. The next few days were incredibly busy. I had an interview with a major magazine about my journey, a meeting with a new business partner, and dozens of orders to prepare. Every day felt like progress. Like I was walking on a path I chose. Then one Sunday morning, it happened. I took my kids to the park. I sat on a bench, watching them play, when I felt someone staring at me from a distance. I looked up. It was Daniel. He was just a few feet away, standing awkwardly, unsure of himself. He looked nothing like the confident man I once knew. He looked older, tired, and weighed down by something invisible. He took a step closer. I didn't stand. I didn't flinch. I just waited. When he stopped in front of me, I looked up. "I wasn't sure you'd even want to see me," Daniel said, his voice quiet. I said nothing for a long moment. Then I asked, calmly, "Then why are you here?" He glanced at the kids, then back at me. "I saw you in the papers. I saw your success. And I realized. I was wrong." I wasn't surprised. I had expected this someday. "You realized that a little too late," I said simply. Daniel gave a weak smile. "I know." He looked down. His hands were shaking. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Not because I want anything from you. Not even forgiveness. I just, truly regret what I did." I nodded. "Are you done?" He paused. I don't think he expected that answer. I looked at him, not with anger. Not with sadness. "Daniel, I've come a long way to be where I am. And none of it has anything to do with you anymore." I stood up. I walked toward my kids. I didn't look back. I didn't care if he was still watching. For the first time in years, I felt light. Daniel had once been a part of my story. But he wasn't the main character anymore. I was. And I knew that I had won, not against him, but against the version of me that once felt powerless. I took my children's hands and walked forward. No looking back. No regrets. Meanwhile, Daniel sat alone in the massive Montgomery estate. The silence was loud. Deafening. Since leaving me and the children, he had gotten everything his mother promised: an elite job, wealth, status, and a secure future. But none of it had filled the emptiness inside. Lavish parties. Business meetings. Luxury vacations. All of it meant nothing. Because when the noise faded, and the spotlight went off, he was left with no one. No one who truly cared. No one who loved him without conditions. And then one day, everything changed. Daniel was sitting alone in his office when a familiar voice echoed from the large TV screen mounted on the wall. He flinched. His head snapped up. It was me, speaking on a morning show. Telling my story. His face dropped as he watched. I was being interviewed on a morning talk show, sitting across from a well-known host. "Your story is truly inspiring to so many women out there," the host said with a warm smile. "From being a single mother, abandoned by your husband, to now running a successful children's fashion brand, can you share a little about your journey?" I smiled gently, calm and confident, a version of me Daniel had never seen. "At first, I didn't think I could do it," I said honestly. "But I realized that if I didn't stand up for myself, no one else would. I had 2 babies who needed me. I couldn't let the past hold me back forever." On the screen, pictures of me and my kids started to play. We were laughing in the park, wearing clothes I had designed myself. The host continued, "Your brand, Little Blessings, has made a huge impact in children's fashion. What's the most important lesson you've learned through it all?" I smiled again. "The biggest lesson was learning to believe in myself," I said. "I'm no longer the woman I used to be. I'm not afraid anymore. I don't depend on anyone. I built my happiness on my own." Daniel was watching from the Montgomery estate. His chest tightened as he stared at the screen. It was like he didn't even recognize me. I had changed. I had become someone new. I wasn't the fragile woman he left behind. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. The final image showed me holding my 2 children. We were all smiling. Daniel turned off the TV, but he couldn't shake the image from his mind. For years, He told himself he had made the right choice. That leaving me was what he had to do. But now, watching me so happy without him, it hit him. He had made the biggest mistake of his life. And he had lost something he would never get back. Without thinking, Daniel grabbed his car keys and left the estate. He didn't know what he'd say. He wasn't even sure if I'd want to see him. But he couldn't carry this regret any longer. By the time he reached my apartment, the sky had already darkened. Everything had changed since the day he left. Back then, I lived in a small, cramped space. Now, I was in a spacious, warm, elegant home. Daniel stood at the door, heart pounding. He rang the doorbell. A few seconds later, I opened the door. It was still me, but not the same. I stood taller. I looked stronger. My eyes no longer held the pain he once saw in them. Daniel opened his mouth but couldn't speak. I crossed my arms. My voice was calm. "What are you doing here?" He swallowed. I saw you on TV. I didn't say anything. I just waited. He exhaled, struggling to hold himself together. "I was wrong, Amanda. I was wrong from the start. I should never have left you. I let my mother run my life, and I lost everything that mattered." I tilted my head, my face unreadable. "And now you realize that?" Daniel nodded, eyes full of regret. "I know it's too late. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not asking for another chance. I just need you to know, I truly regret it. You were the only person I ever loved." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said softly, "Daniel, I don't need that." He froze. "What?" I smiled, but not a soft, romantic smile. It was a smile of freedom. "I don't need to know if you loved me or not. I've moved on. I've built a life I'm proud of. And you are no longer a part of it." Daniel stood there, frozen. He finally understood the truth. "You chose your path a long time ago," I continued. "And so did I. Now, I'm happy. I don't need the pain of the past walking back into my life." Daniel lowered his head. His eyes filled with tears. He knew there was no way to change the past. I took a deep breath and said, "Take care of yourself, Daniel." Then I closed the door. He stood there for a long time, staring at the closed door. A cold breeze passed by, carrying a deep sense of loss with it. He had everything once. And now, he had lost it all. And this time, he knew, he wasn't getting it back. Daniel stayed outside, motionless, in front of the door that had just shut in his face. A part of him wanted to knock again, to beg. But deep down, he knew it was pointless. I wasn't the same woman anymore. I wasn't the one who once cried and begged him to stay. I had moved on. I had built a full life without him. And Daniel was finally forced to face the reality. He had lost everything that ever really mattered. He turned around and walked away, his steps heavy. A sharp gust of cold wind slipped through his coat, but he didn't notice. His mind was blank, except for one thing. "You are no longer a part of my life." Those words echoed in his head like a knife twisting in his chest. But there was no one to blame but himself. When he returned to the Montgomery estate, the grand mansion stood tall against the night. Its golden lights spilled through the tall windows. It was still as beautiful and powerful as ever. The same symbol of wealth and status he once chose over his family. But tonight, all Daniel could see was how empty it felt. He walked into the huge foyer, where the scent of polished oak and his mother's expensive perfume filled the air. Everything was perfect, the Persian rugs, the oil paintings, the luxury furniture. But there was no warmth in any of it. Margaret Montgomery sat in her usual armchair, slowly swirling a glass of red wine. When she saw her son walk in, she didn't even look surprised. "Where have you been?" she asked. Her voice was as cold as ever. Daniel didn't answer right away. He shrugged off his coat, placed it over a chair, and walked to the bar, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. "I went to see Amanda," he finally said, his voice hoarse. Silence filled the room for a few moments. Margaret set down her wine glass and let out a long, unimpressed sigh. "I suppose you've realized that you no longer have a place in her life." Daniel turned to her, his gaze dark. "You knew." She smirked. "Did you really think a woman you abandoned would sit around waiting for you forever?" Her words made Daniel tighten his grip around the glass. "You say that as if this wasn't your fault." Margaret let out a small chuckle, but there was no warmth in it. "My fault, Daniel? I simply guided you toward the path you were born to walk. You are a Montgomery heir, not some ordinary man with a small, forgettable family. I gave you everything." Daniel scoffed bitterly. "Everything? You really think I have everything?" He slammed his glass down on the table, the liquid spilling across the polished wood. "I have money. I have a career. I have power. But do you know what else I have? Emptiness. Every morning I wake up in this mansion and walk into an office full of people who don't respect me for who I am. They respect me because I'm a Montgomery. I'm surrounded by people, yet I've never felt more alone." Margaret said nothing, her expression unreadable as she watched her son. Daniel continued, his voice unsteady. "Meanwhile, Amanda moved on. She succeeded without me. Our children grew up without me. And he let out a bitter laugh. All I have left is this place, you, and everything you call everything." Margaret tilted her head, folding her arms across her chest. "So what do you want, Daniel? Do you expect me to apologize for helping you secure your future?" Daniel laughed, but there was no joy in it. "No, Mother. You never apologize. You never regret anything you do." He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "But I do." He looked straight at his mother, his once bright blue eyes now clouded with exhaustion. "I regret listening to you. I regret losing Amanda. I regret not being there when my children took their first breaths. But most of all, I regret letting you control my life for so many years." Margaret narrowed her eyes slightly, for the first time appearing unsettled by her son's words. Daniel took a deep breath, as if gathering the last of his courage to say what he needed to say. "I'm leaving." Margaret sat up abruptly. "What did you just say?" Daniel glanced around the mansion one last time, his gaze sweeping over the paintings, the luxurious furniture, the expensive decor he once thought he couldn't live without, but now all of it felt like an empty shell. "I'm leaving," he repeated slowly and clearly. "I can't keep living like this. I don't know where I'll go. I don't know what I'll do. But I can't stay here." Margaret stood up, her usual composed tone cracking. "You're acting like a fool, Daniel. Do you really think you can walk away from everything? If you step out of that door, you will lose your inheritance, lose everything I have built for you." Daniel smiled. But it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had reached his breaking point. "You're right. If I leave, I'll lose everything. But you know what? I lost the most important things a long time ago." He turned, grabbed his coat, and walked out of the mansion. This time, no one ran after him. No one stood at the door to stop him. Only a solitary figure walked away from the extravagant world he once thought he couldn't live without. And for the first time in years, Daniel felt truly free. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows, filling my spacious yet cozy home with warmth. The sound of my children's laughter echoed through the air, blending with the soft aroma of freshly brewed coffee. I sat at my desk, fingers gliding over the keyboard, reviewing the latest contracts for Little Blessings, the brand I had built from nothing. I had come a long way to be here today. From a struggling single mother, abandoned at her weakest, I had become a successful entrepreneur, featured in business magazines celebrating women and startups. Little Blessings was no longer just a small online store selling baby clothes. It had grown into a nationally recognized brand, with products displayed in major retail chains across the US. I had even opened 2 flagship stores in New York and Los Angeles, where young mothers came to find beautifully designed clothing for their children. Every day, I was busier than ever, yet I never felt tired. Everything I had today was built by my own hands. No one handed it to me. I didn't rely on anyone. And most importantly, I no longer needed Daniel's validation. The day he walked away from the Montgomery estate, leaving behind the luxury he had once fought so hard to protect, I didn't even know. It wasn't until much later that I heard he had given up his inheritance, cut ties with his mother, and started over from nothing. But that no longer mattered to me. I no longer thought of him with resentment, nor did I care about what he was doing or how he felt. He was a part of my past. But that past no longer held any power over me. That afternoon, I took my children to the park. They ran across the lush green grass, their laughter filling the air. I sat on a bench, sipping my coffee, savoring the peace I had fought so hard to achieve. A woman sat down beside me, offering a warm smile. "You're Amanda, aren't you?" she asked, her eyes lighting up with excitement. "The founder of Little Blessings." I nodded, smiling back. "Oh my God, I'm such a huge fan of yours," she exclaimed. "I've been following your journey for so long. Your story is truly inspiring. You've done what so many women dream of, rising from pain, rebuilding your life, and achieving incredible success." Her words took me by surprise, but warmth spread through my heart. "I just did what I had to do," I replied. "I refused to let my circumstances define my future." The woman nodded, still smiling. "Thank you for sharing your story. You've given strength to so many people." I watched as she walked away, my heart full of emotion. I had never thought my story could inspire others. But now I realized that what I had built wasn't just about providing for my children or making a living. I had become a symbol of resilience. A woman who refused to be defined by her past. That evening, I sat on the living room couch, my 2 children curled up in my arms. I told them a bedtime story, not one about princes or princesses, but about a woman who stood up, overcame hardships, and created her own happiness. "So, did she end up happy, Mommy?" my little girl asked, her round eyes looking up at me. I smiled and kissed her forehead. "Yes, sweetheart. She created her own happiness." As I turned off the lights and stepped out of the room, I paused at the doorway, watching my children sleep peacefully. They were all I needed. I didn't need a man to complete me. I didn't need someone to come and save me. I had saved myself. My life. My happiness. My future. All of it was built by my own hand. And for the first time in years, I knew I was truly in control of my destiny. Life doesn't always go the way we expect. But how we face adversity defines who we become. From being abandoned and hitting rock bottom, Amanda rebuilt herself, refusing to let the past control her future. She didn't need saving. She didn't need validation from the man who once left her behind. Her success, happiness, and freedom were all her own doing. This story isn't about revenge or regret. It's about growth, resilience, and reclaiming one's life. It stands as proof of the strength and determination of a woman in the face of adversity. Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more inspiring stories.